Welcome to the Department of Life Sciences podcast for Women at Imperial Week 2026. International Women's Day 2026 centres on the theme Give to Gain, the idea that progress happens when we intentionally give respect, voice, care, knowledge, opportunities and resources to others. In a university community, that giving doesn't only apply in lecture theatres or laboratories. It happens in offices, technical spaces, meetings, emails, and everyday interactions that keep the system running. We're bringing together voices from across the Department of Life Sciences, from administration, technical teams, research, and teaching, to reflect on what giving has meant in their working lives and what we can all gain when equity and support are shared responsibilities.
In this episode, we are joined by Cordelia. Cordelia, could you tell us a little bit about your role at Imperial and maybe a fun fact or a part of your role that you find most rewarding?
So I'm a postdoctoral research associate, which sounds very grand. I look at the role of microbes in the ocean, specifically how they interact with carbon cycling and how they control our climate through carbon cycling. So I spend a mixture of time in the lab, going to field work, out in weird and wonderful places. I was recently in the Arctic, which was amazing and super special. But I also, spend time in the lab working with students and trying to get to the bottom of what they're doing and replicating what we see in the ocean lab. I guess the thing that I find most rewarding, I really enjoy the field work, and there's a lot of effort and time that goes into that as an experience, not just whilst you're at sea, away from your family, your friends, your normal luxuries, but before and after in terms of prepping for a cruise. I'm just prepping for one at the minute with a few of our lab members, and also afterwards analysing the data. But being at sea, I guess, makes it all worth it. And I find that rewarding, but I also really enjoy talking about my science with people and getting people interested in microbes, because people get scared of microbes. People think that they're all bad and dangerous, but without them, we wouldn't live. Without them, there wouldn't be half as much oxygen that we breathe. So I really love actually converting people into microbial enthusiasts is, my favourite thing.
Great. What motivated you then to carry on or pursue a career as like a postdoc research associate or even within kind of carbon cycling?
When I was younger, I wanted to be a vet. And then I realised that in school that although I worked really hard, I wasn't smart enough to be a vet. And I guess kind of deciding to do marine biology and deciding to have a career in academia wasn't something that I would have thought of at that time. Like, from the same reasons of thinking that I wasn't smart enough to be a vet in that kind of avenue. But I had a really great teacher at school, as I guess all scientists end up having, like the course of them. And I just remember going to him, and I don't know what stimulated it initially, but I was just like, okay, well, I can't be a vet, so I'm going to be a marine biologist. And I spent a lot of time when I was growing up, like on the Cornish coast and going on holiday there. And I loved rock pooling. I loved being in the water. I loved surfing, swimming. My parents struggled to get me out of that. And I think I just sort of was like, I'm rock pooling still at, the age of 17. And I sort of, my mum really hated seaweed. So she never wanted to go to the rock pools with me. And she'd always be like, oh, I don't want to be on this seaweed. And then my dad would come along. My dad would like dig me a hole and I'd sit in it and splash around as a little kid. Maybe not when I was 17. But I think I wanted to be around people that I could do rock pooling with. And I don't even do rock pooling now. And obviously I do microbes and carbon cycling. But I had this really great opportunity by this teacher who got me to send an email to Plymouth University, which is where I did all of my degrees, and said, send me all of the information I need to know. And I actually went back and read the email, and the email was like, I'm choosing my options for my GCSEs. And I want to make sure that what I choose is the right route, because otherwise it could be totally unfortunate if not. And I thought, how melodramatic of me at the age of I don't know how old you are in year 9, maybe 12, 13. But yeah, so that kind of kick-started it. And then I was really lucky. I had this year abroad that came out of the fact that none of my housemates at the time wanted to live all together as a house. And I thought, I'll just go and do a year abroad instead. And I went to Germany, and I had access to amazing research facilities, amazing researchers who just really captured my attention with carbon cycling and this phenomenon called marine snow. And I just was a rabbit hole and just kept going. And yeah, the researchers that I kind of fell into the path of just were always so excited about it that it made me excited about it. And, you know, it snowballs in that way when you have one person that invests time with you, invests in the subject so hard that that's like all they kind of do. It really can inspire you to kind of like carry on. And I never thought it would be microbes. In my first year of uni, I did this microbe practical and all of my plates got contaminated. And now here I am, I sit with a PhD in microbiology, which is...
Yeah, but everything you just touched upon I think is really valuable for our listeners. You have these aspirations at 13, 14 years old, let's say, and your life can turn out a different way, but still be similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, then you think, oh, the decisions that I make right this moment are going to influence my life forever. And being at school can hugely influence your life. You know, if you don't have access to education in the way that I believe that all people should have equal access to education, and with people who care and want to nurture you and support you in the way that you learn and you understand, then it can kind of change your life dramatically. But you think that choosing your GCSEs, that's going to seal the fate for the rest of your life, but people do PhDs in one things and end up being PIs in completely different things. And so yeah, I always think it's kind of wild how serious things were, but I think that's also a trait that I have. Everything feels very definitive in that moment in time, and so I'm learning to become a little bit more relaxed with those kind of decisions. I make a decision, it's not going to completely change the course of everything in the whole world. The world will still go around the sun, you know? So,
yeah. Okay. And that kind of leads me to thinking a bit more openly and a bit more broader, I guess, is, you know, for International Women's Day and kind of general theme of give to gain. And I wondered, when you hear that theme yourself, what does that mean to you?
It's interesting because I think as a woman, I think women do this kind of give to gain. They give a lot to individuals, they give time and support, and there will be individuals across any gender that do that. But I think the society puts that kind of unconscious like thing on women that they are more supporting, they can be nurturing. And I kind of thought about it from that lens, and I was like, actually a lot of the women that I've interacted with in science do have this mentality of giving to gain, and what that kind of looks like is by for me at the very least, is providing either your time or your investment in an individual, because that will cause greatness in that person. And that's not to say that you're doing it because you want to get something out of that person. But I think, you know, with the master's students that I've supervised over the last few years, one of the most rewarding things can be seeing how well they do, where they come in and meet a subject or a topic area and you're like, okay, you don't really know that much about this, but I'm excited to learn alongside of you, because quite often they're also pushing the frontier of the field of research. And so at the end of that, when you see how far they've come, you gain the happiness of watching that and seeing how amazing they are as researchers and what they go on to do. And so I think that's how I kind of view it. But also, you know, people have given me time and support and resources and energy to teach me, to coach me, to develop me as a researcher, from when I was a student in my undergraduate, in my master's project, in my PhD, in my postdocs that I've done. And so I think, by giving me that time, I've gained so much in skills, in mentality, and, you know, their wisdom and experience that they've provided to me. But also in the sense of I can give someone some pause and they can run them for me. Or I think it does provide this kind of two-pronged approach, that women do a lot of this already, but also I have received this. And once you, I guess, can begin to knock down some of the barriers that might stop you from getting that, that's how you can kind of push, I guess, forward, so that everyone has that kind of access to that mentality.
So kind of developing on what you just said, can you share a particular time when somebody gave you some support that made a real difference?
It's really difficult. I am very fortunate for the experiences that I've had of how people have supported me. I guess one like recent history has been around my current boss and line manager sort of recognizing, I guess it kind of relates to what we were just talking about, this idea of like taking on all of these external activities. And I tend to take on a lot of activities. I like doing stuff. I like the give to gain mentality, but I sometimes do that to the detriment of my own, you know, research or my own work and productivity around the tasks that I need to get done. And so one of the kindest things that someone has done is turn around and said, hey, you're doing a lot and maybe you shouldn't be doing a lot, and you don't owe anyone an explanation as to why you want to drop that as a thing, other than the fact that, you know, you are here to do a job. And it was never in like a negative tone or anything like that, being like, well, you're not getting the stuff done. And it could have so easily been that, but it was kind of said in a way of being like, you know what, you've taken on a lot and it's important to be a well-rounded individual. But yeah, someone telling me, saying, actually, you don't owe anyone anything for that. You can leave it where it is and move forwards. And in the same instance, I had another individual when I was kind of talking about the worry about how I was going to, you know, drop certain things off, is saying, well, when you pick something up or when you decide to drop something, asking whether it kind of serves you anymore. Have you gained the skills that you need out of that? Okay, yes, I have. Do I need to pick up anything that's going to give me exactly the same skills? I might enjoy it, but, you know, dropping it is probably the better thing to do there. So yeah, it's kind of been useful for people to be very honest. I think honest support can be some of the best ways to like move forwards. So I'm trying to like drop certain parts, but also be my authentic self in nurturing and caring for people and thinking about my life outside of academia. It's not one or the other, it's this blended version of me. And so that means that I care about what goes on in the world. I care about the fact that, you know, Trump has just suddenly decided that climate change isn't real and it's not a threat to human health and it's not a threat to the environment. And I feel sad about that. And that will inherently impact how my day is, how my work is done.
Thinking a little bit about what you said about the ways that you try and give support to others, I wondered, what ways do you try and support people around you or give back to others?
I think I really try very hard to refuse to forget how hard things can be when you're at different career stages. It can be so easy the more senior you become to go, oh gosh, like this person's not doing this quick enough, or I need this or I need that. And actually just having a little bit of compassion for the person in front of you to recognise that we were all there once. And so I remember when I was a PhD student that I had 2 really influential postdocs and they were really great. But sometimes I thought, oh, you've forgotten how hard it is to be a PhD student. And obviously at the time you think everything's so hard. And it is. Doing a PhD is an incredibly hard thing to do. And we should celebrate when people are doing them and afterwards. But I thought, you don't quite remember how difficult it is. And so it is hard to like situate yourself, but I think that can be one of the kindest things that you can do to individuals. And that just looks like also like listening to someone, right? Like you just have to listen to someone, you know, rant and moan about what their supervisor has done or the feedback that they've been given or how tight the deadline is for something. But I also really like to, you know, provide people with things that I've found useful. And I also really love it. My boss, Emma, she tells me things that are useful for her and, you know, says, take it or leave it. And so passing on things that work and not gatekeeping. Maybe that's not a weird one, but like just remembering that individual is more than just an academic output, right? It's important and it's nice to like find out about people, work out what they like, what doing in their spare time, or just having a chat and getting to know them as a person.
Well, I think getting to know people individually is also really important to be able to offer compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get to know a person, you also recognize some of the barriers that they might have faced. I think we love to think that everything is equal because, you know, we have so many women that are heads of whatever or they're research PIs, and that is great and that's super, but ultimately there are other barriers that people face that stop them achieving science in the same way as an old white man. Having grace for that is integral, and I think it's really like the essence of this idea of give to gain. As soon as you start to understand an individual or underrepresented minority and what stops them from getting somewhere, in that sense, as with all kind of things with EDI, that as soon as you get a more diverse perspective, everything grows.
Yeah, and it's something that we've spoken about before, about how coming from a first generation working class background can also add additional layers and barriers. And just because you're somebody that's progressed from a PhD onto a postdoc doesn't mean that you still haven't got those class barriers.
Yeah, and when I was doing my PhD, I was really lucky that I had my supervisor was a first generation academic, and the person I shared an office with was a first generation academic, and my friends at uni were first generation academics. And my God, does that have a difference for how you perceive your day-to-day life in academia? Imperial has incredible opportunities that I didn't have where I was before, and that's phenomenal. But there are not people that are first generation academics. You were the first generation academic that I met, and the only one that I've met. And so it's, yeah, kind of, you don't ever realize until you're not in an environment like that how it can be hard in that sense. And I think it's the way that you feel in a room that kind of impacts you. And this happens, if you're a first generation academic. It's worse if you're a first generation academic from an underrepresented minority. It's going to experience it a lot harder than, for example, myself as a white woman who has her own privileges and experiences when she walks into a room. But I think, yeah, this idea around, seeing people in positions who are similar to you does make a difference. And yeah, thinking about how we can help to remove some of those barriers to, allow that individual to succeed to the point that they also want to exceed, right? Not, saying, oh, you're amazing, therefore we're going to push you as hard as we can to get you to be a PI at a really young age because that's amazing and that is what we need, and we need more women. I was reading earlier the Felix, the student newspaper. Someone wrote this really interesting article about why she no longer wants to be a woman in STEM. And there was this really interesting phrase about this idea of the altruism of being a woman in STEM, that if you don't work hard and you're not good, that's bad for women. And I thought that perfectly captures some of the experience of being a woman in science.
No, definitely not. And what you're basically describing there is stereotype threat, right? One, you want to represent, in this case, women as best as you can. And that is something that causes undue stress, which kind of brings me to my next question, really, which is, what advice would you give to a past version of yourself?
I think one thing that I would say is that work is not more important than your life or your mental well-being. And academia doesn't necessarily say that explicitly. And, maybe we should use common sense on our brains, but there is also this part of academia, which is if you work hard and if you work the hardest, then perhaps you will be the most successful. There are people that will work every hour of every day, and that's great that they can do that. That's not me. And if I'm talking to myself back then, that doesn't have to be me. I don't have to, I am successful doing what I'm doing. I'm successful because I have a job and I'm able to make the bills and make the rent and do all of these things as a functioning human, and that's success, as well as getting a paper submitted. That's also success. But I think, saying to myself that, no work is more important than life and mental well-being, which definitely at times, particularly during my PhD, it can feel like that is everything. And the world rests on the bit of science that you're doing tomorrow, an experiment lab, an extraction of a sample. But there's so much more to life than that. And also an ongoing thing that I keep telling myself is that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. And that is success. If you achieve something, celebrating those things that were hard for you. For example, you had a bit of anxiety trying to get this task done. You got it done. Celebrate that. You found that hard, whether your boss thought it was an easy thing or your colleague that sat next to you thought it was an easy thing, all the way up to doing a big experiment, getting a grant. Celebrate even the little wins.
And I think that's a really good ethos. We should give ourselves more credit. And then this brings me to my last question, which is a bit more of a speculative question, but thinking about whether that's powers that be in the department or the faculty, Imperial, or even sort of the broader academic community, what's something that you think could be changed, considering this theme of give to gain?
How long's a piece of string? There's the academic system has its strange quirks in its way, but I think one little thing that if any academic was listening to this would be that show others that you're celebrating even those little wins. And I would also love to see Imperial specifically to do a little bit more than just putting women in positions and start thinking more about disability awareness, to start thinking more about race awareness. It is not enough to have one individual who is a Black woman as a professor and to say that we have changed the system. And perhaps Imperial aren't saying that specifically, but thinking about all of these different intersections.
And that brings us to the end, really, Cordelia. So thank you for being on this podcast. It's been a really, really great conversation to have with you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.